Good morning, everybody. Just waiting here to jump in the conference room or in the training room here. Guys, we're going to get started in just a few minutes here. Sorry, guys, there's a class that was just ending here in the training room, and I'm just stepping back in, so we're just a few minute overlap. All right, good morning, everybody. We've got a couple people here in the classroom, and then we've got you folks on Zoom. Hopefully you can see and hear the screen. I'm not going to start my video simply because you're going to be looking at the screen and not at my beautiful face anyway. So we're going to go over the listing agreement. The listing agreement has been changed. I'm going to go over the large print listing agreement simply because it is just easier for you to see on the screen. Ask questions. It's interactive. You can ask as many questions as you have as we go over this if you ran into a particular situation. But really, this is just to get you familiarized, especially with the fact that we have a couple different boxes now on the listing agreement that you didn't have before. So, all right. So to get started, the listing agreement, the first box on there is just to say what the address or the property is that you're actually going to be listing for sale. And then what price you're going to put for the property. So maybe it would be, for example, 1234 Main Street. So we would just do 123. So 1234 Main Street. We need to come up with a new address, by the way. That address has been in existence since I got into real estate and probably before. Like we all say 1234 Main Street because it's easy, but I think we need to come up with a more clever, fun something. Yeah, there you go, Washington Street. All right. So there we go. So we're going to put in the address of the property and then whatever the price is of the property. So for this, we'll just say it's 217.9. And that's all that you have to do on those first two sections there. I would say you want to make sure that as you as a listing agent understand what you're getting signed, it's important to say that last sentence says, if acting as an executor, guardian, trustee, power of attorney, etc., the seller shall provide the broker with a true and complete documents. I have seen many times where listing agents do not get a copy of the trust documents or the POA documents, or they get a POA, and in fact, it is a POA for medical. It doesn't say it is for real estate, real property, or financial services. So you want to make sure you know who is signing the listing agreement. You'd be amazed at how many times agents go out and actually only get one signature on the listing agreement. So because Ohio is a dower right state, we should always have the spouse's signature on it. If this isn't a state, and let's say, for example, the listing is owned by siblings. So me and my sister own this property together. One might think that she and I are the only ones that need to sign the listing agreement, and that's not true. Our spouses should also sign the listing agreement if we're married. Now you might say, well, we don't have to do that at other brokerages, or I've never done that before. Why do we have to do that when they're going to sign off at closing? And the simple answer is it is illegal for us to list a property for sale and market it for sale, enter into a contract that we cannot sell. So I give you the example to say, if my sister and I are in agreement, but our spouses, one of our spouses is not, and does not intend, maybe I'm going through a divorce and you don't know that, right? Maybe my spouse just doesn't like me and you don't know that. So we get all the way through the listing agreement, we get through the purchase agreement, and then all of a sudden we end up at closing and my spouse says, I'm not signing this. I never agreed to that sales price. I never agreed to sell the house at all. Guess what? We're not selling the house. So that is the reason that we require you to get the listing agreement and purchase agreement signed by all parties that are married, simply because you could end up listing a house for sale that you could never sell. So hopefully that makes sense to you. All right. So this is the most confusing part. I thought we simplified it, but I have confused more people simply by this request. And actually, Lynette Killy just walked in. I think this was her request. I'm going to blame her. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. Just because you were late. So the term for the brokerage has changed as far as not the dates, but the terms for the listing agreement percentages that we pay the buyer's broker and that we collect. So you'll remember that we used to have 7% pre-typed in there. So it would have said the listing broker commission is 7%. Well, because of the lawsuits, we've changed that. We now have a blank there. It is 100% negotiable. It always has been 100% negotiable. We just pre-typed in 7% because it was easier for agents to procure the 7%. Typically, they didn't have to argue with a seller, or if the seller said, well, I don't want to pay you 7%, what would you do? And you could say, oh, well, the price of your home is 400,000, 500,000, I'll do 5% or whatever. We can't do that anymore. So unfortunately, with this update, the listing agreement changed just in these 4 boxes. The first 2 that you see there for the dates, let's say that we're going to list the property today, so the 6th. I always recommend taking a 6-month listing. You can take a 3-month listing. A year listing is really way too long. That's super aggressive, and I really don't know why anybody would do that. Unless you have a property that you know is not going to sell in 6 months. Maybe it's a multi-million-dollar property on a lake or something like that. But typically, the average, I would say, is going to be 6 months for a listing agreement. And so that's what I typically put in. All right. So for the listing broker commission is blank. So this is one of those things where if you're new to our brokerage or you're a new agent, commission is negotiable. Now, I will tell you, as a standard practice for our brokerage, I can't tell you what other brokerages do, but for our brokerage, I typically see any more 6% is the standard commission for Keller Williams agents that they charge. I also see them charge 5% if the house is maybe $400,000 or above. It is negotiable. You can collect as much or as little as you want on your side, but just remember that affects your paycheck. So if you negotiate your paycheck away, I don't know that you're going to be negotiating the price or terms for the seller very well. So I would put in there, if I were going on the listing agreement, I would say that I'm going to procure 3% for the listing side. And then the buyer side. So this is something that's new that we said, now what is the buyer's broker compensation? Well, remember, because of the lawsuits, it is no longer mandatory that we offer even $1 of compensation. We could offer $0 in compensation. We could offer 1%, 3%, 4%, whatever percent that you procure with the seller. So I'm hoping that I'm good at my job, and I'm going to say to the seller, we're going to collect a 6% commission total, 3 of which we're going to give to the buyer's broker, and 3% we're going to keep here at Keller Williams Legacy Group. And so for that, I would put 3 in both of those boxes, and then it says the total commission of blank percent, which is 6%. Now that's the part that was new because people were a little bit confused on the previous where it said it was 7%. And then we went down here and the cooperation, we gave away X. They were a little bit confused on what that was. So now it's very clear, in my opinion, we're charging 3% for the listing, 3% for the buyer. It's a total commission of 6%. Okay. And then it goes on to say, or there's a minimum of $3,500. Now, we haven't seen that had to be used in quite a long time, but as we get back into foreclosures and sheriff sales and different things, when the market starts to correct itself, you will start to see where you're going to be charging a minimum of $3,500. That is a suggestion as well. That is our suggestion from the brokerage to say, I wouldn't take less than 35% on any listing because you're going to have work involved. But there are times where you might list a modular or mobile home that is $50,000 and maybe you're only going to charge them 2,500. Maybe it's, a $30,000 inner city property and you're charging 2,500, $1,000 or 1,250 to each party, whatever you're going to do. You can change that, but it's recommended to stay at 35 is probably the lowest you want to go. Okay. And then the next box that is new that may be a little confusing is to say that we changed our additional commission fee to $295 to the broker and blank to the listing agent. Now, the reason that's in there is because we have a lot of different teams and agents that simply ask to charge more than the $295, and that's fine. But because of the lawsuits, for full transparency, the seller needs to know what they're paying and where that money goes. So if you're charging $395, then you're going to put $100 in there as going to the listing agent because your team or you as an individual agent are charging more than the $295. You're going to see our purchase agreement is going to be getting updated at some point too, because again, this is all due to the lawsuits and who's paying what. Even though it says it's getting paid to the listing agent, it still gets paid to the brokerage and then we pay it. Scott has a question.
Truthful though, if you're on a 70-30, it's $100, $295 then as well.
Right, but so Scott's asking the question, so it doesn't seem to be as transparent because the $295, $100 of it is going to the agent and $195 is staying with the brokerage. And that is true. We as the broker are the one charging the $295, though. We can do whatever we want with the commission. This split between the seller has nothing to do with you as the agent. There's nothing to do. We are charging the $295, but anything that gets charged above that, we do not keep as the broker. So we're allowed to do what we want with the collection that we charge, which is the 3% and the $295. How we pay that out to you has nothing to do with the seller. Nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't seem consistent. I think it should be. If the idea is to show what is going to different parties consistent with who you buy, then I think it should be the 100 off of the 295. If that's what the decision is by the brokerage, and the same I feel with if you're gonna have I think we put ourselves at risk by putting in the other minimum amount as a brokerage. I think it puts us in risk with that as well, just in the future. But the
minimum amount, though, is what we are saying as a broker. That's the minimum that we will work for.
Again,
it's negotiable, but we can say that I won't work for a certain amount. There's nothing wrong for a broker to say, I charge X and I won't work for less. It's negotiable. There's no question about it. But again, we can say it's negotiable that we will not work with you if you pay us under $3,500. That's our choice.
In general, realtors all band together and say,
and that's exactly right. The antitrust says that brokerages can't get together and say that we're charging X amount. And that's the whole crutch of the lawsuit, by the way. The lawsuit was NAR typically said you charge 7% commission, 6% commission, and they didn't say you had to, but that seemed to be the standard that agents across the country charged no matter what location you were in. And so there's nothing that says that's anti-competitive that a brokerage can say, I charge X as my minimum. There's nothing against the law that says that is my minimum that I charge. What you can't do is you cannot go into a listing and say, well, the average in our marketplace is 7% or 6%. You can't say that. You can't say what other brokerages charge, but you can absolutely say at my brokerage, this is what I charge. So having a minimum of 3,500 in there is absolutely well within our legal limit to say, we will not work for less than $3,500. Now, if you choose to, as a buyer's or a listing agent, that's up to you. I don't encourage you to do that, but it is not negotiable if we as a brokerage came up and said, you as the listing agent cannot charge less than $3,500. We have the right to do that. We're not doing that, but we have the right to do that. And there's nothing anti-competitive about that. Yeah. Now, as far as the additional commission fee that you're saying, I understand that agents may not like to say that we're charging our consumer more commission. But at the same time, I have to defend when I'm called on the carpet as the broker, somehow to say, yep, this agent can charge $3.99, this agent can charge $4.99, this agent can charge $2.95, and it's all pre-typed in our agreements. How do I defend charging that client more than this client? I can't. But I can say the standard that we charge is $2.95. You, as the agent or the team lead, need to now have something that says, this is why I charge these additional fees, because you're paying for my admin, you're paying for advertising, you're paying for whatever. It doesn't say that we're getting it, even though we still collect it. It is very clear you're getting that money, not us. So it is a hindrance.
For those who aren't subject to it.
And that's the thing, Scott. I would have 15 different listing agreements if that's the case. I can't have that many. But the people that charge more commission, then they have to put it in. Yep. Yep. So, and that's the thing is, that's, I think, one of the issues that we run into at Keller Williams is we allow agents and teams to kind of do their own thing for the most part, and yet it gets us in trouble. Yeah, some do. And there are other brokerages that absolutely forbid it. Berkshire Hathaway, you cannot charge more than their $3.95. And so, that's right, and some don't. So that's the thing is we can't fit everybody, but what we can do is say, these are our standard fees. If you go beyond that, that is on you to put it. That's all we're saying. This is the standard fee for this brokerage.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So how would you suggest to do 3% on the first 100 and 2.5 for that? How would you suggest to put that in there?
So you're saying you're going to give away 3.5, or you're saying we're going to do a 6.4, for example.
Yeah.
So we're going to do,
Right.
okay. So the question in the room is if we're going to do a 6.4 or something like that. So then I would typically do a 3.2 here, and I would do a 3.2 here.
So that is a standard understanding in the.
And then this would be a 6.4.
That everyone would understand. Like it's not written out.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to explain it, and hopefully you're doing a net sheet for your seller so that they understand, because on the net sheet, it does have what the commission is on the first 100,000 and then thereafter. You can split that up. Nope. Nope. I mean, we still see it, and yet I don't see it as prevalent as I used to. Because commissions have sadly come down, but they have. And so I don't see as many people doing a 6.4 or anything like that, as opposed to just a straight 6 or going down to 5. So yeah, you might see 2.5. But the 2.5 is typically because somebody charged 5, or they charge 6 and they're only given 2.5. Yeah. But yeah, you would want to do a net sheet for your seller, which it would have it explained in there where that commission is going.
Oh,
yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So Scott, I take your notes, and I unfortunately say that our attorney drafted this, and so you can beat it out with Jamie when you go to the board next. Yeah. All right. So that is, in a nutshell, that is how those are the changes that were made to the purchase agreement, or I'm sorry, to the listing agreement. And I don't know if anybody else has any questions about that. Everybody's quiet. Okay. All right. So no other questions. Something I'll point out in here is in this paragraph that I don't typically go over would just be the extension of 180 days protection, that we would still be procuring a commission in the event that a buyer comes back that looked at the property during the time that we had it listed. That does happen. It really does happen. Now, I'm not policing it. You might police it, but I'm not the one policing it. So I would say if you find that, come back to us. We'll go to the seller and say, you owe us a commission. But it's just interesting. Today, we have one that's way over 180 days, and we really don't have the right to the commission. So unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that. Okay. All right. So cooperation, this again got a little bit confusing to people because they're like, okay, well, we just spelled out all of this up here. Now you want me to say again how much we're giving away in compensation to the buyer's broker? And the answer is Yes, we are cooperating with other brokerages through the MLS. And so it's either you're offering the 3-2 or you're offering zero. Maybe your seller says, I'm not paying any commission to the buyer's broker. And so that's going to be 0% in both of those. But whatever is in this box up here for the commission to the buyer's broker is the same thing that we're offering in the MLS for cooperation.
But his
Yep.
brokerage says.
Yeah, whatever that broker's listing agreement would look like, they might be offering a $500. They could. Yeah, I mean, you could always, for our purposes here, I mean, I don't know what Dot Loop did, by the way. I'll just be very transparent. Right now, it seems like it's taking them forever to get us back our purchase agreements. We have asked for it 3 times since December. Still haven't got those, so the 295 has not been updated there. And the listing agreement, I can't change even as your broker. I can't make this bigger. I can't cross it out. I can't do anything. It's very frustrating. We don't know what they did. So in Scott's case, typically, if you were charging a flat fee and you were able to cross out this minimum of $3,500 if you needed to, you could do that. But also if you were giving away, let's say just $500, you could then put in here $500 and just pull this over just a smidge to where it covers the percent. Unfortunately, I can't do that to show you until they unlock this for us. But that's what you would do and do the same thing down here. Okay. So, but for this example, I'm just going to say it's 3-2. Okay. All right. The MLS, we are a part of more than one MLS. So, I mean, we have Columbus, Mansfield, Ashland. Yes, MLS. And I think that's all for Legacy. Oh, we still have Firelands, I think. Yep. We still have Firelands. I think we might not be there. I haven't seen a bill from them in a while. Is Tina still in it? Okay, so then if Tina's in it, we are. So, but yeah, there's very few agents that are going all the way up to Firelands. I know Tina, I think, won for the most mileage on her car that one year or something like that. So she's everywhere. But anyway, this is cooperation with all of our multiple listing services. It doesn't just have to be Yes MLS or MLS Net. All right. So lockbox access. This does say that we are going to place a lockbox on the property. It also says that we have the right to grant inspectors, appraisers, and things like that access to it. I would tell you, you don't want to just give the lockbox code to an appraiser without asking your seller in writing through an email or a text, something that says, the appraiser is going to be out next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Do I have your permission to let them go in the house without? That's what you really need to have, because unfortunately, agents just think, well, it's in our listing agreement. I can go ahead and just give anybody access to the property. And that's not true. It's with the seller's written permission or consent. And if the seller is not aware that you won't be with them, you probably shouldn't be giving out that lockbox code. It's the same thing for home inspectors as well. Even though you have the opportunity to let a home inspector go in the house without you or without the buyer's agent, perhaps, you need the seller's permission to do that. You can't just, I'm finding out lately there are a lot of newer agents or transfer agents or even agents that have been in the business a while from other brokerages that are just automatically letting home inspectors go into somebody's house with the buyer and did not get the seller's permission for them not to be there as the buyer's agent. A licensee has to be present at all times during whenever a buyer or anybody else is in that home. The listing agent better have the permission of the seller in writing that says that they don't have to accompany that person. So I know that buyers agents sometimes think that because a home inspector is licensed through the division, that they are licensed and allowed to have the home without the agent present. That's not true. If the seller doesn't authorize that, you can't do it. So I stress that because I'm seeing it more and more where agents are unaware that a licensee, a real estate licensee, must be in the house with them. So
we don't know that though.
Yeah. Yeah, if you don't know that, which happens too, as the listing agent, what I would say is a good standard of practice for you is whenever the home inspection gets set up, is you say, and you will be present during the entire inspection, correct? Because You will be surprised at how many agents will be like, no, I just go open the door and then I leave and I come back like 3 minutes before the, no, 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 no. And you don't have to be that difficult about it either. If the seller is really okay with a buyer's agent opening the door and leaving and just the home inspector and the buyer being present, by all means, that's fine, but you better have it in writing from your seller. And I don't know why they would be okay with that. It doesn't make any sense because as an agent, when you're at the home inspection, if something is broken, you are the one that's giving that to the listing agent to say, hey, this was broken, or the attic access, we tore the paint because somebody painted it closed, or, whatever the case would be. And how many times a home inspector is in a house without an agent, the seller comes home and goes, oh my gosh, there's insulation all over my floor. They didn't clean it up, or they didn't do this or didn't do that. And you as the listing agent had no clue that anything was either damaged or out of place because the buyer's agent didn't report it to you. So always a good idea. And this works both ways. We're talking about the listing agreement here for you guys, but same thing for the buyers. You want to make sure that you're representing your buyer to the best of your ability. Go to your home inspections and make sure you're at things. It was very common back in the day when the test inspection was done not simultaneously, and they would take 20 minutes. So as a listing agent or a buyer's agent, I wasn't running over to the house to let them in. It's like, here's a lockbox code, go ahead and go in. We've gotten away from that. I still see some agents do it, but again, it's not to say that you can't do that, but the seller needs to be aware, hey, the pest inspection company is coming in next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. By the way, they have a lockbox code that I can give them. Is that okay with you? They're going to be in and out in 20 minutes. Yep, sure, great. Thank you. Perfect. Just get it in writing. Okay. Any questions about that lockbox access? I see Melissa Sanford's friendly face on here, and I know we've had plenty of discussions about that. She's had plenty of trouble out in Worcester with those people.
Hey, Rich, does this apply for appraisers as
Melissa,
well?
you came off mute. Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, does this apply for appraisers as well?
That's exactly what I was gonna ask.
Nope. Okay. If you do, I can't hear you. Let me see. I think the TV, let me make sure the volume on TV is turned up just in case you are saying something. Okay. Yep. Okay. There's something in the chat. Let's see here. Does
I
this
just
apply
wonder, it
for
applies to
appraisers?
appraisals
Yes,
as
it
well,
does apply
correct?
for appraisers as well, because they are, even though they are licensed, like, and they have through the MLS, they're licensed with the state, it still doesn't give them a right to be in a property without the seller's written permission from the listing agent. So if the appraiser is going in, and typically the appraiser calls the listing agent, they don't normally call the buyer's agent. So if I'm the listing agent and I get a call from the appraiser, of course I'm going to reach out to my seller and I'm going to say, hey, the appraiser's coming in at this time and this day. If I can give them the lockbox access, is that okay with you? I don't need to be there. They're going to be there 20 minutes and gone. Absolutely, that's fine. But you definitely want to make sure anytime somebody is going in the house, whether they are licensed or not, you have the seller's permission. And showing time allows that. Like, showing time allows you to do an appraiser, it allows you to do an inspector, it allows you to do, I think, a video tour now or something like that. So you don't have to do it if you're going through there. It's giving permission. The seller is giving permission. It says an appraiser is coming through or whatever. Now, what you need permission for is the lockbox. The seller may not be aware that you aren't coming with them and you're giving the lockbox code out. That's the key. Okay. All right. So then authorization to market the property. So we are going to take photos of the property. We're going to take possibly Matterport. We might take a diagram of that. We might do overhead view. There are some sellers that actually don't want some rooms photographed. They may not want their house photographed at all. I haven't really ran into that lately, but I mean, I have in my career where there's a sheriff or somebody like that that's like, no, I'm not giving you, floor plan access to my house so that if I'm burglarized, they know the whole layout of my property. Or I'm not letting you have photos in this room because I have a gun safe or I have whatever. And so, very simply put, you just don't put that out there. There are some times where a house will close and we'll get a call and they'll say, my house is still on Zillow and all the pictures are there from the people that owned it before. Well, there's nothing we can do about that. If the seller gave permission to have those photos out there, we can't get them taken down, but we can control whether or not our current seller allows us to put photos out there and 3D maps of the property. Because the same thing would go, when we're doing home inspections and things like that as well, understand, I think it's pillar to post, if I'm not mistaken, they'll do Matterport on the property and they'll provide a layout, which is a great service to the buyer. But if the seller didn't give their permission for your buyer or their representatives to be taking pictures or videos inside their property, they shouldn't be doing it. So, I mean, how many times I see on Facebook, and it's funny, I laugh at them, but I'm not going to post them. But how many times I see on Facebook, a buyer's agent goes into a property and takes a picture of something odd in a property and then posts it online for everybody to laugh at. You just took an unauthorized picture in a property, perhaps, maybe you had the seller's permission that you could take photos in there. Most likely you didn't, and you took a photo and posted it online. That's a no-no. And I will tell you, the division is cracking down on that more and more. Let's see. So Melissa Sanford saying, we have a whole sheet giving written permission for appraisers, photographers, and cleaning persons, etc. And they sign at the time that we sign the listing, which is great. And then all you have to do, and again, our listing agreement says that we have access, like we can give them access to the property. It's that lockbox, giving them the lockbox code. So if your form says you're authorizing us to give them that lockbox code and they could come in without us, a licensee, a real estate licensee, then you're covered. So. Okay. All right. Electronic surveillance. So this goes back to a couple years ago when Ring doorbells and everything was becoming very, very, very popular, and now they are standard. You never want to say anything inside or outside a house that you don't want the seller or somebody else to hear, because you just don't know where the cameras are or the Ring doorbell if it's recording. So whether it's a nanny cam, a baby cam, whether it's any kind of recording device, Ohio law says that if you are audially recording somebody and you are not a party to the conversation, it's illegal for you to do that. So as an example, if I have my cell phone here and I turn on to record, as long as I'm in the room having a conversation, I can record it without a problem. If I leave the room and record a conversation that takes place in this room without me being present with my device, that is illegal. So we put this in here to say, we have sellers that say, well, I'm not turning off my cameras or I'm not removing my cameras. That is up to you. Originally, our attorney said you should tell them to turn off the cameras because they can't record people. No, we're not doing that. Well, not our attorney, the state's attorney. Our attorney's like, well, if you tell the seller to turn off their cameras and then something happens, guess who they're coming after, right? So we don't tell the seller they have to turn off their cameras. We just let them know. We say, check this box. You do or you do not have electronic surveillance. And then in the broker remarks for the MLS, you would simply say, be aware that there is surveillance on the property, or Ring cameras present, or you'll be videoed inside the home. Now, it doesn't say that you can't video, it's the audio. So that's why I started with that. The other thing is there are sometimes sellers will say, well, it's not recorded. I can watch it live, but it's not recorded. Well, sadly, that I'm aware of, there hasn't been anything covered on that. So I suppose you could watch somebody live as they're having a conversation, as long as it's not recorded. It's just better to disclose whether somebody is got recording devices or not, or any kind of surveillance. So we just cover it with surveillance. Okay. All right. And then fair housing. This fair housing statement is the same as it is in the purchase agreement and everybody else's listing agreement and purchase agreement. We don't change it. It's standard from the state. And then the disclosure would just say that the seller has reviewed the property disclosure form and they have filled it out without assistance from the listing agent. You're going to find in your career, if you haven't already, sellers all the time ask you, well, I had a little bit of water come in the basement one time 3 years ago. What should I say? Well, is that something? Yeah. Is that something that you would like to know if you're buying the house? Let them answer the question. I can't help you fill out the form, but maybe if it's interesting to you that you would want to know, you might want somebody else to know, but I can't help you fill out the form. So you can put it on there, not put it on there. So what I typically say to you is, when you are with a photographer, or if you're not at the property, let them fill out the property disclosure form when you're not around. That's the best thing to do, is when you are not present for that. So they can't ask you those questions and put you in odd situations that you don't want to answer. An agent should never fill out the property disclosure form, ever. You should never sign somebody's name to any of the forms, even if they ask you to do it. You are not a power of attorney for these people. And so There's never a problem until there's a problem. But I've seen plenty of agents that will say, oh, well, you forgot to initial the last page or the, second to last page on this. Oh yeah, just throw my initial on there. It's fine. Nope, don't do that. Don't do that on any of your forms, but especially the disclosures.
No, I don't know if this is okay, but I tend to say it's more of a protection for yourself. You disclose any issues that you know about. Like,
Yeah, you absolutely. I mean, Lynette's saying, for those of you on Zoom, she always says to the seller, you'll want to disclose any defects that you're aware of with the property. And there's nothing wrong with saying that.
it's like
it's-
a protection for yourself.
it is a
to
protection for
disclose
yourself.
that stuff.
The other thing I will tell you is, if you guys haven't used it before, it's sellershield.com. It is free for agents to use. It's free for the seller to use. But if you go to sellershield.com, you as an agent can create a free account. And then you can have every seller you have fill out the property disclosure form in lead-based paint using that service. And it has fun little videos that explain to the seller how to fill out the property disclosure form. The great thing about it is they have to answer every question. They cannot submit the form back to you until every question is answered, which is what I really like about it. It puts it in a nice little bow, puts it in your email. They've answered all the questions for both that and the lead-based paint. And also it gives the seller an opportunity. I don't remember how much it is, maybe $300, $400, something like that. They can purchase insurance in case they are sued during this transaction or after the transaction, and it covers them for $20,000 worth of attorney fees. So it's a great opportunity if a seller says, you know what, I'm a little bit nervous about selling. I'm doing everything right, but I'm still a little bit nervous. I'd love to take out this insurance policy. And you as an agent can even buy it as a closing gift or whatever for them. And if you sign them up for it and you pay for it, I think it's a discounted rate that you get. So I would highly recommend using Seller Shield if you haven't used it before. So, all right. And then this just basically says that, the seller has disclosed everything under the disclosure part and that they are going to hold us harmless of anything. Well, I can tell you now, they don't always hold us harmless because there was a time, and it wasn't our brokerage, but we were involved on the buy side. There was a listing broker that went out to a property, or a listing agent. They went out to the property and they said, there are hardwood floors underneath all of the carpeting, is what they were told by the seller. They think. And so they put in the MLS that the carpet needed, replaced. But there were hardwood floors underneath all of the carpeting. Well, guess what happened when the buyers went to pull up the carpet? There was not hardwood floors underneath all the carpeting. There was only in the living room. That was the only place. And the buyer said, I wouldn't have bought the house or paid X for it if I would have known that I had to put all this carpet in. I thought I was going to have hardwood floors. So even though a seller is disclosing either something good, bad, or indifferent to you, if a seller discloses something to you, you want to try and verify it as much as you possibly can. I don't expect you to go around and pull up the carpet around the house, but if the seller says, I've lived here since 1970 and there was the same carpet is here from when I moved in till now, chances are they probably don't know that there's hardwood floors under the carpeting either. And so therefore they would say something like, you might say, it's believed that there are hardwood floors underneath the carpeting. You wouldn't say there is. So be very careful about what a seller discloses to you and what they don't. One thing that got one of our agents in trouble, and we did have to pay for it, is, or the agent had to pay for it rather, was another hardwood floor situation. There was a huge sofa, very large sofa, a sectional sofa in a very small living room. It fit just fine, but you didn't have a lot of room to walk around it. And then there was a rug in front of that with a coffee table. And the seller, during the disclosure process, during filling out the property disclosure, said to the agent, there's some scratches on the hardwood floor underneath the sofa. Should I disclose that? And the agent said, well, if it's just scratches, like surface scratching, whatever, you don't have to disclose that. So unfortunately, the agent did not ask them to move the sofa and look at the scratches, and they shouldn't have said, go ahead and don't disclose it. When the sofa was removed and the buyers took place, there were not scratches, there were gouges in the hardwood floor, gouges. And so the seller gets a call from the buyers that says, you didn't disclose this. And they said, well, my agent told me I didn't have to. And the agent recalls that conversation. Yes, they did tell me that it was scratches, and I told them they didn't have to. Well, guess who's paying for that now? The agent did. So that's why I would say to you, on the disclosure, it's better if you're not around, you do not want to answer the question, yes, I should or shouldn't disclose something.
Seller still on something, I knew something needed to be disclosed.
Mhm.
And then didn't.
So what did you, yeah, so what did you think needed to be disclosed that the seller was not disclosed?
They fixed it, and I didn't disclose it. They said, you absolutely have to disclose this. It needs to be in there.
Well, so when you say you absolutely have to, you should say you should disclose it because it's a defect, right? If there was a roof leak and it was fixed, perhaps it is fixed and there's nothing more to say about it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like there wasn't even that.
Sure,
It needed.
but it should be disclosed. On the disclosure, it does give a look back period of 5 years on certain items, not all items, but when in doubt, disclose. It's really that simple. And so you can encourage the seller to, but what I would say to you is if you have a seller that says, yeah, my basement flooded a year ago and I'm not disclosing that because I had it fixed, and you now know the house flooded, you have to disclose that as the agent. So you have a choice now. Do I work with this seller and let them know they should probably disclose it because if they don't, I'm going to? Or do I just walk away from this listing altogether because the seller is deceitful and I'm not going to be caught up in this? It's a hard decision to make, but yet it's one you have to make.
I know they're not rough, like they pointed
Hmm?
something out. I'm like, that, you should put that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. Right, you can definitely say that is something you should disclose. You could say it's something you should disclose.
And if someone did it for whatever reason, where would you disclose it if you as a realtor were aware of it and you knew something?
If I were aware of it as a realtor and I had to disclose something that the seller refused to disclose, first of all, I would probably put something in writing to my seller, like an email or something that says, just so you are understanding, I am going to disclose this to the buyer's agents that write an offer on your property or whatever. You have to follow lawful instructions of the seller. So you don't want to just go rogue and just start telling everybody and their brother that there's something wrong with the house. But
Maybe
at the
it's
same,
downtown seller and it's kind of a rundown house or something, so that, you know what I mean, like, you know that there's a problem, like, I guess I'm just wondering, can you put stuff in the broker remarks to say? I don't think this is.
I would not. So Lynette's question is if I have an out-of-state seller and I know there's something wrong with the house, but the seller perhaps may not. I guess my only question to you would be, how is that possible? If you know it and you've disclosed it to them, then they should disclose it. Yeah, if you're witnessing water coming through the wall, that's something you're going to disclose to the seller. Or there's a wet basement, take pictures. I mean, you know, that's the thing too, is you can't hide from pictures. So if you sent those pictures to the seller and you did your job to disclose it to the seller and they're refusing to, again, that's a question you have to have for your own morals and say, do I want to be caught up in a potential liability lawsuit because I know it and didn't disclose it? But you also don't want to just say, yeah, my seller told me not to disclose that, but I'm going to anyway. No, you should probably just not be working with that seller because they've told you not to do something that you're legally obligated to do. You're going to get yourself in trouble one way or another. Yep. So, confidentiality, one of the things that I think is interesting about this is as a listing agent, you do have to give your client the right and fiduciary duty of confidentiality, meaning that if your seller says, I'm in the middle of a divorce, but I don't want people to know that, or I'm in the middle of a divorce, you should probably ask the question, am I allowed to share that information? Because what can happen is back in the day, and it hasn't happened lately because of the market, but in a normal market, a buyer will take full advantage of a seller that's getting a divorce by simply saying, oh, well, they're getting a divorce. They don't like each other. They probably want out of the house. I can get it for a better price because they're just ready to sell. Well, now you've given away your seller's hand, and that's probably not the best thing you could, well, it's not the best thing you can do for your seller. So you want to make sure that for the disclosure part of it or confidentiality is that you are keeping anything your seller wants kept confidential. Okay, you don't share that. We actually had one this past year where both the buyer's agent and the listing agent received no commission from a relatively large transaction. I would consider $450,000 large transaction. They were both due a commission. It was within the brokerage, and unfortunately, neither one of them got any commission because the listing agent leaked some information about the seller to the buyer's realtor, who then told the buyers about it. And unfortunately, that's why they felt they got a better deal on the house and why the sellers got beat up on the house. Even though this came out later, we were in a very bad position because the listing agent did in fact give that information to the buyer's agent because they were friends, and the buyer's agent shared it with the buyer thinking they'd get a better deal on the house, and guess what? They did. So we were out commission.
Like, I guess I feel like if I'm representing my clients. and
The
I'm
buyer's
saying-
agent, so I will explain the situation a little bit more, because you're right. Why would the buyer's agent, in that case, they used it to their advantage? Shame on the listing agent. Sure. One, the buyer agent and the listing agent were friends. So it complicated things, because if the buyer agent didn't give up their commission, the seller was going to sue us, and they didn't want to see their friend sued. And also, it got a little bit worse because we're at the same brokerage. So it wasn't like we could say, oh, well, we represent the buyer. If you're going to go after somebody, go after the listing company. We were both. We were a dual agent as a brokerage. So therefore, unfortunately, it was either zero commission or we're getting sued. They had us over a barrel. So it was a very, very unique situation, but could happen again. So, when we say confidentiality, it really does mean you can't say things even to your friends and other agents that they shouldn't know about your client. So, well, they shouldn't ask, but you shouldn't be telling. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but I can tell you, as a buyer's agent, you can ask a million questions. You'd be surprised at what the listing agents tell you. What can you do? Right, you have to use it to your advantage, right? I mean, there's not many buyer's agents that don't, but certainly if it's in your own brokerage too, be very careful. Yeah. And then any excluded fixtures. Excluded fixtures, just because you put them here does not mean it's excluded in the MLS or the purchase agreement. So I often get that question, well, we excluded the refrigerator or the chandelier or whatever, right, in the listing agreement. And I put it in the MLS that it was excluded, but we didn't exclude it in the purchase agreement. Then it wasn't excluded, because the listing agreement is between the brokerage and the seller. The MLS, something could change in your negotiations in the purchase agreement. I might say I'm not leaving the washer and dryer in the MLS, but you've talked me into it because you're paying me an extra $2,000 on the purchase agreement, and now it's in there. So anything that's excluded here needs to follow through in the MLS and the purchase agreement. It is not automatically excluded. Okay. And then home warranty, the seller does or does not elect to provide a home warranty, who the company is, and what the cost is. Okay. We don't have very many point of sale inspections in the counties that we typically service here in central, I don't even know that we're central, northeastern Ohio, whatever you want to call us, other than septic and well. We do see the septic and well. So Stark County is required that you have a septic inspection. The well is optional. Summit County, you have to have both. Melissa, what's Wayne County's? Neither. Okay. So you don't have to have either. Be aware of that though. And I will tell you, if you write a deal in Summit County that says we will do the inspections after title transfer for the septic and well because we want to get the house and win the bid, the county will stop the sale, because it's happened to me personally, and they will say, no, just because you wanted to win that bid, it is required that you have a septic and well at the point of sale at the time of the sale. So you're not doing it after, you're doing it before. We will not let the home transfer.
The exception.
Stark doesn't. If you get, Summit County has a few exclusions, and there's a form that you can fill out and you have to send it in, but it has to get approved. I did the form and I said we wanted to win the bid, and so we went with no inspections, and they said that's not a legitimate reason, so no.
Like secret website that has all the counties that are going to sell.
There is not a secret website, but I will say, Scott.
You do?
Well,
Can you share that secret form with me?
well, I can let you.
Okay.
What I would say is, Scott, being a part of the local board, I would task you or nudge you to say that would be a great service that Stark Trumbull area realtors could offer to their realtor partners. And they did at one time. In fact, I have one all the way back from like the early 2000s where it has all of the counties around us in Northeast Ohio and what septic and well is required. So it's super helpful.
Require the inspections to be done by the county, and some of
Yes.
them have outside people,
They do.
so it's a little confusing.
Yeah, the only way to really figure it out is to call each county health department and figure out what services they offer versus what inspectors are allowed to do. So,
I had
We had a
somebody,
situation in Tusk where the exemption was filled out by the seller, and then like when I called the county to talk to them more about it, they said the seller had paid ahead of time, a small amount of money,
Mhm.
like in essence, paying them to already do the job. But they said they've done that in the hopes then that you guys will actually go ahead and get it done, but they
didn't know.
don't actually follow up and
Didn't.
make sure you get it done.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Stark County, I know will let a home transfer. If you don't do a well and septic, they absolutely will. They won't stop the sale, but Summit County does not. So they will stop it. Has anybody sold a home in Cuyahoga Falls lately? Just a question, because they had a drain downspout point of sale inspection where it was elective, from my understanding, but the seller or the buyer could have during a point of sale or during the time of the sale, the county come in or somebody come in that was recommended by the county. They would scope the downspouts on the house to make sure that those downspouts were not going into the sewer. It was going into the storm drain instead of the sewer, because some of those homes were built and it went into the sewer. And when it rains real hard, the sewers back up or overflow in people's homes. And yeah, it's not covered by flood insurance, but so I will tell you, if you sell in Cuyahoga Falls, check that. I have not sold one there in years. The seller had it done when we went to purchase and it was fine, but that was quite some time ago. So Zarice has got a question. He says, I have a deal held up now because of septic leaching in the wrong place. But they had the septic inspection last year when they bought it and it passed. Yeah, I mean, anything could happen in a septic. I mean, yeah, it could go bad. I mean, they say the average septic tank is only going to last about 25 years. I've seen septics that have been in the ground for 40 to 60 to 80 years. So, absolutely.
They're saying,
Seller
this is-
obligations.
this
So it
is
just says
Stark
that the
County.
seller it's their responsibility for the property and its contents. You as the listing agent, you can say, hey, I will happily go check on your house once a week if you're out of town or you don't live here, I'll go check on it. But I'm not responsible if something happens where the pipe breaks and the house is for sale and the basement floods or there's water damage or vandalized or anything like that. It is absolutely the seller's responsibility to make sure the house is winterized and protected, not yours. Now, it's a different story if somebody breaks in your lockbox or something like that. So I recommend you use Supras, but otherwise it's on the seller. And then cybersecurity, we are in the process of looking at getting some insurance for cybersecurity. We currently have a little bit with our E&O coverage. But if you, for some reason, give a buyer wire instructions that you should never be doing, and they wire the money to the wrong place, we could be found liable for cybersecurity issues. But also what's happening is agents will get their email hacked, and you are responsible to make sure that your client's information is protected and secure. So we do not ever want to give wire instructions to any client. Let the title companies do that. And I think Stonegate now is even doing it by phone. They're not even doing it by email so that it doesn't get hacked. And then just as this is a binding agreement, of course, we will let somebody out of the listing agreement if it's absolutely necessary. I leave that up to you. As the broker, I have to sign off on any withdrawal with releases. But I can also say, I'm not going to argue with you. If you say, I'm done with these clients, I'm over them, they've made me mad, they don't want to disclose things, whatever the case is, I just want them out of my life, fine, we'll release them. And we've had it both ways where an agent's like, no, I don't want to let these people go. They've been a royal pain in the butt and I don't want to see them listed with another property or another agent or whatever. Sometimes you just have to say for a business decision, it's not worth the argument. They're not going to list the home with you again. They want it off the market. Just release them and let them go about their day. I have seen some where it's legitimate. We won't let them go. And it's simply because the seller doesn't listen to us when we told them that the price was too high. They didn't listen to us when we tried to negotiate an offer and they called all the shots. And in those instances, I have seen where agents have said, we're not signing it. And I support you in that. But just know that if it comes with a withdrawal with release, I have to sign it. Give me the story. Let's figure it out together. Sometimes it's not worth keeping. So, but it is a binding agreement otherwise. Okay. And then the sellers just sign, and the listing agent does need to sign this. If you're on a team, the listing agents that represent the seller need to sign it. So I'll give you an example. Jose automatically has his signature on all their listing agreements. And then if it's Kevin McCulley that is also the listing agent, he signs it. I know that we've had a discussion. I had a discussion recently with one of our transfer agents that said, hey, I've never had to sign the agreement as the rainmaker, just my agent did. And I can understand the reasoning behind that maybe another broker didn't require it for whatever reason. But my question is, if you don't sign the listing agreement, how does the seller know who's representing them? They're not going to know until the agency disclosure comes, and that's a little bit too late. So the listing agents that are representing the seller should always sign this. Very rare would you have three. So I can see two signatures on here, but 3, 4, 5 really wouldn't make sense when it comes to listing agent signatures. So the rainmaker and whatever agent's handling that should be on there.
So I could just make a flat copy with Scott.
You could make a flat copy with Scott's signature on it. Yep. I can guarantee you that Jose's not signing every single one of those every time they come through. I'm sure it probably already has his signature on it, or they have a stamp or whatever, but the seller needs to know because they get a copy of this. You should be giving your seller a copy of all the documents they're signing, which means they say, oh, these agents are representing me, not just this agent. Yep.
What about in general, you know, with having people on your team? I know this isn't specific to selling, but
Lynette's got a question, which I'll repeat here in a second, guys. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, just in general, I guess, what's our responsibility for making sure that anybody knows in general, like who's on this team? Like, is there a reason they would need to know other agents on the team if those other agents are not seeing their information, you know, like for Sophia or
Yeah.
anybody else?
So Lynette brings up a very good question, which I probably have a different answer for than maybe other brokerages, just simply because I think that it opens you up to more liability on a team. So we actually have a team that's going to be transferring over in the next couple of weeks. And I looked at their disclosure and they have every single agent, all 6 agents on their team are on this agency disclosure addendum. And that is not what I would recommend. I know there are plenty of agents that do it. The reason I say not to do that is simply because if you have an agent that is less experienced or prone to making mistakes, and I am on your team, I do not. So let's just say in this example, I'm on Scott and Lynette's team. And Scott, you're just bumbling. You've sold 2 houses in your career. I do not trust to be with you. But Lynette says, Rich, you're on my team. We're all 3 on the agency disclosure form every single time. As the agent, I might say, why would I want to do that? I don't trust Scott's ability to sell a home, and I'm not going to be liable for what he does on the team. And Lynette, you as the rainmaker can say, yep, I like that answer. You're right. Or you can say, no, I don't like that. So know who you're getting in business with on your teams and what that looks like. My suggestion on this is this. Typically on a team, you have agents that do listings and then you have agents that do sales. Now, sometimes you have them do both. The both is going to be a little bit more tricky. But when you have them that is separated, so like I can say clearly on Jose's team, there's a list of agents that represent the seller. Then there's a list of agents that are buyer's agents. So in my opinion, if they were to use, which they don't, a addendum for the agency disclosure form, I would list all of my listing agents on one with Jose, and then I would have a separate one for my buyer's agents with Jose. And that way, those people know who they're working with and whether or not they trust those people. Now, again, you still run into that, but I would say that the people on the listing side, they're covering for each other when they're on vacation. They kind of know how they do each other's business. They're probably more comfortable with that. The buyer's agent, same thing. They know one another. They know how they transact business together, so they might be more comfortable with it. So that's what I would say. That's my recommendation. And the only other thing you can do is really every agency disclosure form you put on there, the rainmaker, the licensed admin, because if your admin is licensed, they have to be on there, and then the buyer's agent or listing agent. So you can fit 3 names on there. And you can even make the box bigger. You could fit lots of names on it. So but I would definitely say this. Fill out your listing agreements and your purchase agreements and your agency disclosures all the way. Don't leave blank boxes. I mean, we've got a deal right now, an issue, and I looked at the agency disclosure form, and I just cannot believe that nobody filled out the seller's information on the agency disclosure form. The buyer's information's on there, the buyer's agent, the listing agent, and the both buyer and seller signed it, but nobody decided to put the seller's name at the top at either company. It just baffles me. So, yeah. Any other questions? We've gone over by a couple minutes here, but I want to respect everybody's time in case you guys have any questions at all, whether it's not on the listing agreement, whether it is on the listing agreement or anything, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions. If not, you guys all hopefully have a good day. Okay.
I do
Thank
think,
you.
can we have the lead-based paint?